Hi, Claire. How are you doing? Hey, Johan. Where are you from, guys? England. Me too. Well, I'm originally from Brazil, but I live in England. Yeah. Do you know Norfolk? Norfolk, Suffolk. I live in Norfolk. Where do you live? Oh, Devon. Okay. I have a few friends. Um, they live in Cornwall. Yeah. They teach yoga there. I used to teach yoga. I don't teach anymore. Mm. What do you do? And you? Do you work at the cost as well? Hey JB, how you doing? Oh, you work in Cornwall. Nice. Thank you. This is um, there is an area that produces graphic medicine in basically, yeah, formed by artists. Some of them with medical or a background in sports and science, physiotherapy, psychology. So yeah, what I'm doing here, I'm pretty much uh, doing a graphic novel. This is the first page of this novel where there is this character that is teaching the clavicle. This is it was supposed to be a sketch, but I'm trying to add a little more. Thanks, Claire. Don't forget to follow me, Claire. Then we can have another chat. You can follow me on Instagram as well with the same name. Is the same name of my YouTube channel. I share way more things there. I have way more videos. I believe, yeah, and I have other contents as well. So yeah, if you want to follow me on Instagram, feel free to follow me. Thanks, JB. Oh really? What do you share there? It's your user. This one, JB Pokemon. Oh well, I will have a look when I finish here. And what do you share there? Oh, cool. That's that's really good. And do you sell as well? No, that's a good start. What you could probably do is do you draw as well. So you should maybe start to make your own cards in a live. Yeah. Thank you. Bye. Have a good time. Um, just thinking. Okay, guys. So we have here the clavicle. The clavicle is a long S-shaped bone that presents two surfaces, two borders, and also two ends. We have the lateral end, medial end. You can also call the lateral end the acromial end, the medial one the sternal end. About the borders, we have one that is anterior, which is this one, and the other one is posterior. And the surface are basically the superior and the inferior surface, that is this one. Okay, this is the clavicle from the superior view, and this is from the inferior view. Now, something that you will notice if I move the sketch close to the to the camera is that I didn't add any um, any lines here, um, I forgot the name, but yeah, any lines here. But the reason why it because this area, because it's the superior one, is the one that will be in contact with the skin. I will invite you to, if you are here with me, if you are watching this live, I would like to invite you to touch the clavicle. And if you don't know what is the clavicle is that paired and this asymmetrical bone that is close to your neck. If you bring your hands close to your neck, you're going to feel two bones. And we have these two bones that will be one on the right, the other one on the left. The reason why they are paired and the reason why they are asymmetrical, it's because during the development, one of the bones will probably be thicker, will suffer some deformity, and this is quite common. It's not something that is not expected. Actually, it is expected because our body in reality is asymmetrical. Now, the inferior surface is different when you compare with the superior one because it presents more uh, rugosities, or presents more a more a rough area, a rough surface. And the reason why it because here on the inferior surface we have much more areas for muscle attachment and also ligaments. For example, we have here at the medial end, this is representing the costoclavicular ligament, this impression here. But we also have here at the lateral end another impression for another ligament. This one is for the trapezoid ligament and this one is for the conoid ligament. Okay, they are both part of the coroclavicular ligament. We have one coroclavicular ligament that is by two other ligaments. We have the trapezoid and conoid ligament. And remember that we have one medially, that is the costoclavicular ligament. This area here of the mid shaft is called the, it's actually a groove. Okay, we call the subclavius groove. And this area presents an impression, which is the impression for the insertion of the subclavius muscle. Do we have any other areas for muscle attachment? Yes, we have. We have one here, more, let's say, posterior inferior, called the cost. Actually, this one is for the origin of the sternohyoid muscle. And we have one more anterior here that is for the pectoralis major muscle. Laterally, you're going to find more towards this area here, which is posterior. Actually, this one is an anterior. Okay, this one is anterior. This border here. This one is the area for the deltoid muscle. Okay, this one here. We have for the deltoid, we have for the pectoralis major muscle, we have for the sternoid muscle. And if you flip the clavicle and see the clavicle from the superior surface, you will find the same impression here. Fascicles of the trapezius will probably extend towards the anterior surface of this area of the bone, okay, which is more lateral and also anterior. External, actually this one is for the trapezius muscle, and this one for the pectoralis major muscle. This one here, we have an impression here more, I will say probably the superior surface will be for the sternocleidomastoid muscle. The sternocleidomastoid muscle, I'm pretty sure that you know where is this muscle. If I ask you to turn your head to the right or to the left, you will feel, and you touch your neck, you will notice that there is a muscle stretching, actually contracting. For example, if you turn your head to the left, you will feel the muscle, the sternocleidomastoid muscle of the right side. And if you turn the head to the right, you're going to feel the sternocleidomastoid muscle of the left side. Okay, so this is what you can contemplate when you look at the clavicle. Another important feature: the clavicle is the only bone that will lie transversely. If you consider that here is the head and we have the clavicle here, this one is the clavicle of this side, this one is the clavicle of this side, is the only bone that will lie transversely along the body. And it presents two curves, as I mentioned. We have a medial curve, which is this one, where the concavity faces posteriorly, and the anterior curve, where the concavity faces anteriorly. And we also have the the superior and inferior surface. And superior and inferior surface is quite interesting. Coming back to the superior and inferior surface, because they have so many things that you can find there. For example, I mentioned this before, but let's just review. You can see here that the clavicle doesn't have too many lines in this illustration when you compare with this part of the clavicle, which is the inferior one, superior, inferior one. And the reason why, because this area is related directly with the skin and the platysma muscle, which is a very thin muscle, a layer of muscle that will uh, protect the the neck. I will say that is one of the first barriers together with the skin and the fascia. Okay, so and it's important to remember that it will be separated actually uh, from the bone, these structures, only by a few sensory branches of the superficial cervical plexus that you can name as well as a supraclavicular nerves. And also, if you get a clavicle, if you have the opportunity to have a clavicle in your hands, you will notice that superior surface is quite smooth in its middle portion. Again, the reason is because we don't have any surface for muscle attachment, and it presents a slightly, usually unobtrusive rugose at its medial and lateral ends, which serve as site for the attachment of the sternocleidomastoid muscle, pectoralis major muscle, and then the deltoid muscle. And we also have for the trapezius muscle. Okay, this insertion is much more distal insertion for the trapezius. Okay, what else? I know that's a lot of, we have a lot of things. But yeah, I can tell you about the inferior surface. And the inferior surface is this one here, represented by this illustration. It's also convex, but more irregular in texture, as I mentioned, especially when you compare with the superior surface. And if we move from medial to lateral, we are going to find adjacent to the medial end a rough area for the attachment of the costoclavicular ligament, which is this area here. Okay, I don't have any color pens with me now, but you can see here that I illustrated a very different area. And we also have slightly more laterally longitudinal groove. This one, okay, this is the longitudinal groove, which serves as a site for attachment of the subclavius muscle. And I want to talk about the mechanical resistance of the bone, okay? But before I continue, I would like to mention that most of the fractures, usually when they happen at the level of the clavicle, they will happen in the mid shaft, right in the center of the bone. Because if I keep my pen here, you will notice that we have this curve and another one here. Actually, this curve here, it's slightly twist as well, and is quite thin compared with the other parts of the bone. Also, what else makes this area so susceptible to fractures? The fact that we don't have too much muscles here. We have more muscles at the medial and the lateral end than here in the mid shaft. So, lateral to the groove, we are going to find this rough surface that's more orientated obliquely from, you can lateral to medial or medial to lateral, and from posterior, if you consider this part here as a posterior, from posterior to anterior, okay? And this will serve for the attachment of the two costoclavicular ligaments. Remember, costoclavicular ligament presents two ligaments. We have the conoid ligament, and we also have the trapezoid ligament. Remember, I'm going to repeat again. The the coroclavicular ligament presents two ligaments, conoid ligament and trapezoid ligament. And they will insert into the conoid process of the scapula, which I will talk in the near future. Now, also on this surface, usually near its midpoint, I will probably say here, we have a nutrient foramen, which typically opens obliquely towards the lateral end. And about the borders, okay, we have the surface, which I mentioned, and we also have the borders. And the borders are also palpable over the skin. You can palpate the superior surface, and you can palpate the posterior, anterior border, also the medial end, and the lateral end are all the parts of the bone that you can palpate over the skin. You cannot palpate the inferior surface, of course, because the inferior surface is facing towards the internal structures of the thoracic cavity. There is an anatomical relation with a few structures that will be relevant, especially when you start to learn about clinical anatomy and how fractures that happen at this area can affect the neighbor structures. Okay, so about the posterior surface, well, I mentioned the posterior surface. About the borders, okay, let's start with the anterior border, which is this one here, and also this one here. Both anterior borders of this illustration are facing to each other, and it's quite blunt. It's quite blunt, okay? You might find a little bit rounded, but basically it's blunt. And along its medial 2/3, close to the sternal end, you will notice that provides attachment for the pectoralis major muscle also, okay? And its lateral third is generally more uneven, and it will provide insertion for the pectoralis muscle as well. And about the lateral third, here, also uneven and sometimes rough, and this one is basically the area of that will serve for the insertion of the deltoid muscle. Okay, guys, this is pretty much what you're going to find at the anterior border of the clavicle. Posterior border of the clavicle. Okay, now talking about if we talked about the anterior, we should talk about the posterior. And about the posterior one, okay, and it provides attachment for medially here to the sternocleidomastoid muscle, this part here, more towards this part of the superior surface, sternocleidomastoid muscle, especially the clavicular head. Okay, remember that we have two heads and the sternocleidomastoid. When I talk about this muscle in specific, I will explain the different heads. But basically the clavicular head, which, as I mentioned previously, extends its insertions onto the superior surface of the clavicle as well. Laterally, the anterior fibers of the trapezius, which, like the sternocleidomastoid muscle, will also occupies part of the superior surface of the bone. So we have here at the posterior border an impression on the clavicular head of the sternocleidomastoid muscle and the fibers of the trapezius muscle. About the middle portion of this border, which is usually quite smooth and uniform, here we will not find any area for muscular attachment. But do you remember when I mentioned that we have neighbor structures to this area that we cannot palpate? Yeah. So the neighbor structures, yeah, which this area will be in relation, more or less. Here we have the omohyoid muscle, especially the inferior belly, scalene muscles, subclavian vessels, and also we have the apex of the lung. Okay, the apex of the lung will be in relation with the posterior border, the mid shaft of the, or the middle portion of the posterior border of the clavicle, and finally we have the ends, lateral end towards the scapula, medial end towards the sternum. The medial end, guys, is really robust. Okay, it terminates close to the sternum. Actually will articulate with the sternum. We have an articular facet there, which will basically outline, and is, I will tell you, that's highly variable among individuals, because everything will depend of the shape of the medial end, because the medial end can be square, triangular, or even oval in shape. Now this facet is depressed in its center and is irregular until approximately 20 to 22 years of age. Thereafter it becomes flatter and more uniform, and it basically articulates with the manubrium of the sternum via the articular disc. Okay. Anything else to mention here? Probably not. Okay, lateral end, which is this part here. Okay, this one is considerably smaller but flattened super inferior, and is more elongated anteroposteriorly. If you see here, this one is supposed to be more long or elongated anteroposteriorly, and it terminates laterally in a small oval facet, uh, whose greatest diameter runs basically anteroposteriorly. Yeah, and articulate with the acromion of the scapula. So this is pretty much the two borders, two surfaces, and two borders. Sorry, I'm being repetitive. 2 borders, 2 surface, and 2 ends of the clavicle. We have a few other things that we can cover here, such as the internal structure and architecture, but I still want to think about how I'm going to make the main character here to explain the middle end, the borders, and the superior and inferior surface of the clavicle. It's this character is already explaining the superior surface. I need him to explain the inferior surface, and I will think about the layout of the illustration. Yeah. So yeah, guys, I'm in the live here now, so I think that we did a nice, productive together. I'm not sure if you enjoyed the topic. I drew this character, which is pretty much me, and yeah. So tomorrow, I'm not sure if I'm gonna do another live. If not tomorrow, probably on Friday. So stay healthy, keep drawing, and see you next time.